This is the Montana Outdoor Podcast, brought to you in part by Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer in Missoula, home of Boss Snowplows, CM Truck Beds, and Diamond Sea Trailers. Just go to rmtte.com for more information. And by Superior Hardwoods of Montana, home of the largest selection of in-stock high-end wood products and flooring in the western United States. Let them guide you through the woods at superior-hardwoods.com. Now, get ready for more fascinating topics and the most interesting people you will ever find in Montana's great outdoors. We offer new podcasts most every Saturday. You can get a link to these podcasts by going to our website, montanooutdoor.com, or by going to our Facebook page, or just send an email to downrigger@montanooutdoor.com and say send a link to my email. It's that simple. Now let's head out with your host, Downrigger Dale, and see what's going on in Montana's great outdoors.
Thank you very much, Manny, for that introduction. I am Downrigger Dale with the Montana Outdoor Podcast. Thanks, everybody, for joining in here today. And today we want to talk about, there's a lot of names for them. Most people refer to them as antelope in Montana. The more accurate name would be pronghorn. But I, for one, have known they're called pronghorn for a long time, and I can't seem to get it out of my head that since I was a kid, I've been introduced to antelope. So, and of course, some of you call them speed goats and all that stuff. But the season got underway on the 7th of October, and so I thought we'd better check in. In fact, I have never done the podcast on the pronghorn. So this will be interesting. With me today is Scott Thompson. He is a wildlife manager with Fish, Wildlife, and Parks for Montana. And Scott is you're based in Region 6 over there in Glasgow. Is that correct, Scott?
Yeah, that's right, Dale.
Okay. Welcome to the podcast. Thanks so much for taking time out of your busy day and to chat with us a little bit about this.
Yeah, my pleasure.
So, Scott, understanding these animals is, to me, I've always been fascinated with them. One, because a lot of people think of them as an antelope, as in related to like a gazelle or an eland or something like that over in in Africa. But they're not really an antelope at all, are they?
No, they have, I guess geologically or over time, they've evolved on their own course. They're most related to a giraffe.
Yeah, that's what I've understood too.
Yeah, and don't ask me where that connection comes from. But they are not, they share some similarities with African antelope, speed and way they evade predators and, kind of the association with plains or grasslands. But I think it's some of their, characteristics of their, horns, some, adaptations they've taken over time that kind of separate them from African antelope. So,
yeah, I was reading an article about them one time that in fact, I believe it was a biologist over in Idaho. I'm trying to think of his name. But he had surmised that one of the reasons the antelope is so fast is they had to evolve over time from their biggest predator way back in ancient times, because the antelope goes way, way back. From the American cheetah, which is, of course, extinct and has been for long time, way before we were here. But that was apparently an incredibly, from what they've seen from their remains and that they were an incredibly fast cat, and the antelope or pronghorn was their favorite meal, and so that was why they had evolved that way. Is that kind of what you've understood as well?
Yeah, I think you're right, Dale. Why else would a North American land animal be the second fastest mammal?
Mm-hmm.
only second to the African cheetah. And yeah, it's long ago, 10 to 15,000 years ago, when we had cheetahs roaming around North America. This was the adaptation that pronghorn antelope adapted to, was if you can't hide from them, you better be fast.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that certainly carried through as the cheetah dropped off the evolutionary chain. And antelope persisted through ice ages and through the test of time, so that we can still have them on our landscape. So it's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, I mean, you think about it. They made it through ice ages. They made it. They outran the American cheetah and all that, but it wasn't until the late 1800s that they were almost wiped out by humans, from what I
Yeah.
understood, and that was mainly just farmers changing the landscape and unregulated market hunting and all that really took its toll. Now, the number that I heard was that at their lowest point in all of North America, there was only 15,000 left. Is that what you heard?
Yeah, I think that's right. I don't know the figure for Montana alone, but yeah, across their range, across the western third of the U.S., 15,000 animals, probably from some peak in the millions,
Yeah.
no different than bison.
Mm-hmm.
So you bet.
Yeah, that's the other thing I heard, is that their herds were very similar to the size of bison herds, and millions of them and all that. Now today, the number that I get is about 1 million are left. They've made quite a comeback with, of course, biologists and wildlife managers such as yourself that they took from strongholds and kind of spread them back around the plains, and they repopulated. But so there's about 1 million left in the U.S. About how many do you think are in Montana itself?
The current estimates, range in that 150,000, plus or minus 10%. And that's certainly the kind of the current status of antelope. We've seen higher numbers historically, but currently, about 150,000 or so in Montana. So.
Yeah. And when I started going through, every year, in fact, those of you that are listening, if you've never looked at this, the big game hunting forecast, the FWP puts this out every year. I find it really interesting because it does give you a lot of great information about where the big game animals are, what their populations look like, by regions around the state. And unfortunately for pronghorn hunters, the populations that I've been seeing just going through here are down pretty much across the state. I was just going to pull up one of them here. Over in the biologists were saying that the populations have declined over in the two Bozeman area pronghorn districts. That's 360 in the Madison area, 311 in the lower Gallatin, Madison, and Horseshoe Hills. Now, that was due to a severe winter. And more than 30% of collared pronghorn in the Madison died, and spring counts also reflected a decline in that magnitude. When I look through the rest of the state, I'm seeing kind of a similar story, that this winter was very, very hard on pronghorn. Is that kind of the same way you're seeing it over in Region 6 there?
Yeah, we're not seeing antelope populations rebound year to year like we had historically. Antelope really react to weather and habitat conditions. And so following whether it's severe winter conditions, such as some of western Montana saw last winter, or in the case of much of eastern Montana, it's 2 years or more of drought conditions. And all those things really impact antelope populations on a year-to-year basis. They can be very, very productive populations when weather conditions are right. We see just tremendous fawn recruitment and populations perform well. But as these weather conditions or the winters or drought predominantly affect what it is adult does and their ability to both reproduce and then raise a young. We see these wide fluctuations in populations. So, yep.
Well, and that kind of surprises me because when you think about it, the antelope will eat. They're pretty hardy as far as they'll eat. I've even heard that they'll eat part of a cactus. Now I don't know if that's true, but that's something I've heard. So why is it that drought affects them so hard? Is it just that the does can't produce enough milk, or why do you see it?
Well, I think it happens a few different ways, and so the body condition of that adult female. Now she's the one that's driving the populations. Okay, and so if she goes into winter condition after a drought in poorer condition, her ability to carry, two fawns may be limited. That may only be one fawn, and she may enter the springtime in poorer condition as well. And whether she only has one or two fawns, and then when that fawn hits the ground, there's about a week or two in there when survival is most critical for fawns. And so if that fawn hits the ground and due to drought conditions, potentially there's very limited hiding cover, that fawn is way more susceptible to predation. And so that's kind of the second function of, why we focus so much on weather conditions and habitat. And so if cover conditions are not as right, and we see a higher fawn mortality, that can limit the amount of number of fawns recruited. The second part that you alluded to is any ungulate when they fawn or calve in the spring. That's timed with the highest nutrition forage out there, and so if that antelope is trying to produce milk under subprime conditions with poor forage, that also might limit the amount of milk production and fawn survival. So really, it's just a few different factors, but that carry out across the year, and the timing of that dictates that fawn survival and then recruitment into the population. So.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, is there anything that you guys can do to help that along, or is the pronghorn just pretty much at the mercy of the weather?
Well, we can't affect the weather.
Yeah,
you bet. But
yeah, you haven't figured out how to do that yet. Yeah,
haven't figured that one out yet. But antelope, certainly they take advantage of crops and hay fields and things of that nature due to high quality nutrition at times of the year. But keeping their winter ranges in prime condition, and oftentimes those are native sagebrush dominated, or maybe some other forb and shrub components. That's the real critical winter range of those browse plants that are highly nutritious during the wintertime. Those farm fields, although they were lush and green in June, don't provide any winter forage or habitat that helps them through the winter. So that's something that we do focus quite a bit on is winter range, trying to maintain or at times conserve those areas in good condition.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second thing is more and more the reality that that the different fences on the landscape at times can prevent or maybe just delay an antelope moving from one place to another, migration. so that they can get to the best, whether it's winter range or fawning areas.
Mhm.
So that's another aspect that we've focused more on, is working with both landowners and land management agencies on making their fences more permeable to antelope and other wildlife, so that they can access the resources that they need. So.
Mhm. Uh, well, we're going to take a quick little break here and chat about one of our sponsors. But when I come back, I'd like you to talk a bit about antelope migration, and maybe you can kind of explain what that looks like in Region 6 there, and then if you have any thoughts as far as what the migration is like in other areas of Montana. I have heard that the antelope has one of the longest migrations of any ungulate out there, but we'll chat about that coming up right after this. Hey, thanks so much for listening to this podcast. You folks really make the difference here for us by tuning in, but we could not do what we do at all without great sponsors like Superior Hardwoods of Montana. Now, let me kind of fill you in on what's going on there with everybody. They have so many great things. For example, they have extraordinary flooring lines. Now, a lot of their flooring is made right there. They have this huge lumber yard full of all kinds of stuff. You just got to go see it in Missoula. You can go online and take a look at all the different flooring in that. But John and Corey and the rest of the gang of Superior Hardwoods, they've been in business since 1977. You don't stay in business that long by not doing it right. Go online to superior-hardwoods.com, and you can even read the reviews from everybody. You'll get a feel that these guys really know what they're doing. They strive so hard to make sure their customers are satisfied and get what they want. So back to the flooring. Go take a look at all the different things that they can do at Superior Hardwoods. Everything from flooring that will just blow you away, and that I guarantee they have flooring in there with woods you've probably never even seen before. Then you can even go into things that can accent that. You have got to see the alder molding they have there. Unbelievable. The list goes on and on. So go to Superior Hardwoods. That's superior-hardwoods.com. Take a look at what they've got going on there online. Then you have questions. Easy. Just give them a call, 406-251-2272. Or if you want, and I think you'll love going to the showroom, it's at 5120 Highway 93 South there in Missoula. I have just talked to so many people that go, you were talking on your podcast about these guys. Well, then we went, and you weren't exaggerating, Downrigger. I mean, this place is amazing, and they know so much about it. As we like to put it, they will guide you through the woods at Superior Hardwoods of Montana. You got to go see them. Superior Hardwoods of Montana. That's superior-hardwoods.com. Oh, you're going to like these folks. You're going to love the way your house is going to look when they get done with it. Go see them. And we're back here on the Montana Outdoor Podcast. Downrigger Dale here with you. Scott Thompson is my guest. He is a wildlife manager in Region 6 based out of Glasgow. We're talking about antelope today. And Scott, one of the things that I want you to talk a bit about is the migration process of these antelope. And you brought up fencing and how that affects them. I'd seen an article, it was, I think, in the Montana Outdoor magazine, talking about fencing in that. I guess I'll start first with this question. What is it about antelope that they have such a hard time with fences? You know, you look at deer and elk and and that, and I mean that they'll clear a fence no problem. Why do antelope struggle with fencing so much?
I suppose it's that evolutionary development. They're fast. Being able to jump something, a barrier, was just not in their DNA 10,000 years ago. Partly the habitat they live in. They're a species that relies on their sight largely to both detect and evade predators,
Mm-hmm.
as well as their nose, as any hunter knows. And so being able to jump something on the prairie just was not a necessity 10,000
Didn't
years
need to
ago.
do it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Why start now? And so, yeah, that um, you know, it's not the lack of ability to jump, because certainly we've seen antelope that that do jump, some successfully, unsuccessfully, but they would much rather go under those fences. So
Mm-hmm.
and so that's certainly what we focus on, is trying to get those antelope under fences, without harming themselves as well.
So what does a good antelope fence look like? Is it just got a much higher bottom strand? Then is that what it is, or?
Yeah, a good antelope friendly fence is going to have a higher bottom wire, 16 to 18 inches, and preferably smooth wire. The reason for smooth is those antelope going under the fence routinely, especially with barbed wire, they start to lose the hair on the spine of their back. Not a critical thing for an antelope in summer or fall, but as they enter winter, that lack of insulation really takes a toll on antelopes.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, a high bottom wire, but even at that, folks that maybe don't have the resources to raise that wire or change their fence,
Mm-hmm.
just opening gates goes a long ways for antelope. A lot of times antelope will follow a fence until they either reach another corner at another fence or find a high spot in the bottom wire. And so just opening corner gates or gates can go a long ways to help antelope through.
So for landowners, if there's no reason to leave that gate closed, go ahead and leave it open, and that allows them to move along.
You bet.
So
You bet.
where do they? Let's start with the area you're in Region 6. What is the migration pattern of antelope in your area?
Well, we in Region 6, so we're in the kind of the heart of the High Line, and antelope, are seeking those kind of high quality native sagebrush ranges. That's going to be their prime winter range. And so what we see is antelope triggered by fall or early winter snowfall moving to those types of areas. And so we have, in every population, you have a segment of antelope that they move whether it's snow free or not. They're just migrators. They're wired that way. And then we have other antelope in every population that tend to be more resident. And the residents will stick it out until it gets really bad, and then they'll move. Okay. And so there's kind of two different strategies there that's interesting in every population. Those that move at the first snowflake,
Yeah.
and those that stick it out, and it's probably just like every Montanan.
Yeah.
Maybe sticks it out or goes south in snowbirds.
Yeah.
So
I'm gonna ride it
um,
out. It can't be that bad. Yeah, I
yeah,
got you.
yeah. And so we see quite a bit of that different behavior north of Highway 2. All those populations that go from really the Milk River or Highway 2 all the way up into Canada and into Alberta and Saskatchewan. And so we see a fair bit of antelope movement into our state from the north, as well as our northern populations in Montana. And they're either moving to winter range along the Milk River, or in some years they'll push right through the Milk and head south. And in fact, in the winter of 2010, they decided that they'll go across Fort Peck and they'll winter south of the Missouri and Fort Peck Reservoir. And so they'll go at times as far as they need to go.
Hmm.
I think the longest one way in our corner of the world was somewhere around 200 to 250 miles that was recorded with the GPS collar.
Mm-hmm.
And so when they need to, they'll keep moving.
They just go until the weather conditions and the food sources are right. And so this time of year,
Mm-hmm.
what are they looking for, and where are they heading this time of year?
Well, this time of year, we're kind of in that post-rut period. So antelope, rut and breed from later August through mid to late September. And so really they're still kind of in that late summer, fall, the habitat they're looking for is driven by forage condition. And as hunting pressure continues to increase, they also think about places without roads, no doubt. And so that's really what they're looking for right now. They're probably not thinking about winter quite yet. It hasn't dipped below freezing, not more than a time or two yet. So that forage condition is certainly a big driver in addition to hunting pressure. So.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so they're kind of feeling it out, cruising along. Hunting pressure starts to edge up, and they get I suppose, like most other critters. Now, that's the one thing that the antelope in Montana has a bit of a, I don't know if that's a fair reputation, that they're not a very smart animal as compared to their other ungulate brethren. Do you agree with that? Or
Well, I don't think I would agree with that completely. I think the thing that draws people to antelope, whether it's viewing or hunting, is they're such a visual animal.
yeah.
They're both they're looking for you as a predator, but they're out there in plain sight, hiding,
Mm-hmm.
quote, hiding.
Yeah.
But no doubt, smart antelope will find those areas that are further from roads and just flat as a pancake. They can see anything coming from a mile away. And you'll notice, especially in areas with a lot of public access, that a lot of those groups will find themselves either there or behind some orange paint somewhere. But yeah, to say that they're not smart, I don't think so. I think any population, whether it's deer or elk, they get pushed and pressured and encouraged to find those areas where they can take a breather. So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. To me, I think we some people may view them as, well, they're not very smart because here they are out in the open. Well, that's where they live,
yeah.
But you see them when they decide to get evasive. I mean, they can be there and gone in no time flat, and that vision that they have. What would you say is their biggest defense? And we'll start with hunters, against hunters. Is it the vision? I mean, their eyes and their vision is pretty amazing. Or is it scent, do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. As an antelope hunter, I mean, you have to factor both in. I've
Mm-hmm.
never snuck up on an antelope upwind in my
Yeah.
life, but
Yeah,
I have
true.
snuck up on, not snuck up, but an antelope that's inquisitive, or no doubt they see you, but they're not worried about you at that point in time. I think that does occur, and some of that is, they're trying to figure out you and probably weigh their risk. Is it worth risking and running to a new area, or do I just stand here and see if actually you are something to be concerned about? So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
And what do you think that they view um, us as? I guess maybe we'll start with their main predators other than humans. What are the main predators that antelope have in Montana?
Well, coyotes would be the other main predator, and more of a concern for fawns and young animals, although they could take down an adult, but they're mostly keyed in on easy meals. So that would be fawns. Golden eagles can certainly take their share of antelope. Both fawns and adults. At times we've witnessed golden eagles sitting on the backs of antelope and eventually killing that animal so they can consume it. So it does happen.
Really?
Probably more of a.
Are you saying that the golden eagle is just kind of hanging out like any bird, just along for the ride in the back, and then decides, well, I'm hungry, I think I'm going to take him out?
Slowly but slowly pecking away, and that's a rare kind of extreme event, but we've seen it over time enough times to know it's happening. But those eagles are probably more influencing the population when they're taking younger animals out, but it can happen with adults. So.
And so what is the antelope's defense with golden eagles? And I spent most of my life in western Montana, so I didn't get as much exposure. So I haven't seen a lot of predation of antelope, firsthand. But when golden eagle says, "Okay, yeah, that's going to be my meal," how the heck do they get away from that?
I don't think they do.
It's just wrong place at the wrong time. Is that it?
Yeah, it may be, and I would imagine that they key in on maybe a weaker animal, or it could go back to those antelope if they've got no hair on their back and they're kind of bad body condition. They may key on those individuals. So,
and what are the other predators that you see? You got coyotes, golden eagles, wolves at all? Probably don't see many wolves in your area.
Yeah, no, I think it's both their ranges don't overlap very much. We typically don't have any kind of wolf abundance in those areas with antelope in eastern Montana, certainly, but in the western side, antelope are pretty well restricted to mountain valleys and those kind of areas where wolf numbers are typically not allowed to be very high. So, yep. Yeah, but no, the coyotes and probably eagles are the primary, and then of course humans. We would be their number one predator through hunting. So, yep.
And what is their main defense? Is it with humans? And I'm kind of getting at here as far as tips for hunters, especially some hunters that are new to the sport of antelope hunting. What are they looking? What is the antelope looking for there? And because they kind of have a distinct advantage in that they know the area very well. They have vision that's amazing, an incredible scent. So, what's the best way for a hunter to get into where they have a good legitimate shot at an antelope and not be discovered?
I think antelope hunting is, because they're such a visible animal. That's our advantage as a hunter is utilizing some good optics, binocular spotting scopes, and trying to detect those animals at a great distance before either they detect you or they become worried about you, pursuing them. And, I've often found it kind of depends on how pressured antelope are. Some will have a pretty high level of tolerance for humans, at some distance, 500 yards, 1,000 yards. And other antelope that have been pressured, boy, it might be a mile away, and that antelope sees that pickup on the hill and they're gone. So, I think every hunter kind of needs to think about that a little bit. How pressured are the animals, and finding yourself at a high enough point that you can see quite a bit of country and try to find them before they find you or see you, excuse me. And then becomes the my favorite part of the hunt, planning the stalk. How are we going to get there?
Right. So, yeah. And what's your technique there as far as stalking the these critters, uh, you find a lot of getting down on the ground, or how do you approach that?
Well, I, for one, am a fan of hunting an area where I can reasonably have enough terrain that we can get at least reasonably close before we start crawling. So there are certainly areas that are just flat as a pancake, and you just realize that those are going to be challenging areas to hunt. They're doable, but you better wear some knee pads to keep the cactus out of your knees
Yeah.
and gloves. But yeah, using the terrain that's on the prairie, I think a lot of hunters may think that it's just there's nothing out there, but as you plan a stock and you start to look at the shallow depressions that are out there and the sagebrush and whatever you have to work with, and certainly using that to get within whatever range you're comfortable at. So, but I've been on few antelope hunts that didn't involve some kind of crawling. So
yeah, you better be prepared for that. I've certainly witnessed that and experienced that. I'm a little long in the tooth these days to try to do that, but I hear you. What about time of day and weather conditions? Does that change how you as a hunter are going to approach things?
I think time of day is less of a factor than we think of other big game species, because of that visible nature of antelope. But even at that, antelope are most actively feeding at, early morning and late evening, just like our other species.
Sure.
And they have their way of kind of bedding during the day in what seems to be the wide open, but concealing themselves, whether it's a low fold in the landscape or out there in some flat. So I think it's still wise to focus on those first light, last light periods. But boy, the funnest part about antelope hunting is if the morning hunt doesn't work out, there's even a midday hunt because of finding the next group. So, but I think conditions are probably a bigger factor, and what I've noticed hunting with my boys over time is hunting in the wind for antelope is very challenging. They tend to be very skittish for whatever reason in the wind. And maybe it's partly because, their ability to detect you through smell is reduced. And so they see even the glimmer of anything, they're gone, I feel like. So windy conditions get really challenging in my experience.
So that I imagine
of course,
would
on
be
the
something to look
plains
for
of
a little.
eastern Montana.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, out here we deal a lot with mud. And so that just becomes the how do you get around? And so that's always the other thing to factor. It never fails that prior to an antelope opener, seems like we get some moisture. So.
What are the conditions looking like, and how do you see, going into later in this month of October? This podcast is going to be released on the 21st. So, have you heard in your area what that's looking like, and as far as good footing and dry, or what have you seen?
Oh, yeah, we haven't had anything in this corner of the world that is going to really hamper hunters. We've had a pretty nice fall and not a lot of moisture on the horizon right now. But I think it's always something to kind of look at because there can be some pretty, localized events that can make it pretty tough. And I think we've got some areas that got some rain here recently, and hunters will find themselves, no doubt, in those areas from time to time. So.
The other thing that has really amazed me about these animals is their ability to, of course, they've got a great burst of speed, but they can hold like at, I don't know, say 30, 40 miles an hour. They can go for quite a while at that speed. I mean, if you spook them, they're it's not like they're going to run for a little while and you may find them. I suppose that happens, but as far as I know, what I've read about antelope is that they can sustain they're both, what am I trying to say? They're both a short distance speed, runner, but they're also a long distance runner. Now, does that have to do with their physiology as far as their lung capacity? What do you see there as their reasoning that they can do this marathon go for long stretches?
Yeah, I don't know if they necessarily have a higher lung capacity, like a ratio. But an antelope's build is a bit sleeker, built more like a long distance runner. An adult buck is going to be maybe 120 pounds, or a doe is 100 pounds versus deer that are proportionally larger, and elk, of course, more so. And you could say that living on the plains year round, they're certainly well exercised, and being in that visible realm all the time, they're frequently having to move to whether it's evade a risk here or there. So physiologically, I don't know. I don't know if they're more capable than any of the other species, but rather, they've developed this over time, and they routinely practice evasion through long distance or short spurts of running. So,
Okay. Well, we're going to take one more quick break, and when we come back, we'll wrap it up here. But I also wanted you to, if you've got any kind of tips, other types of hunting tips, or ways that you feel you can help our listeners out, maybe share those, or just tell us right where to go and exactly where they're sitting right now, and we'll just run out and bag one. But we'll see if we can pick Scott's brain here a little bit and get you folks pointed in the right direction, whether you're heading his way up in the Glasgow area, or hopefully we'll give you a few ideas, no matter where you're chasing these speed goats. So we'll do that right after this. It just seems like yesterday we were sitting in the heat going, "Ooh, this is a hot summer. What are we going to do?" And we were worried about forest fires and all that. But now, all of a sudden, you feel that little tinge in the air, the crispness, and it won't be long, folks. The snow is going to fly. This is the time. If you've ever thought about getting a snowplow so you can get that driveway of yours plowed, or let's say you own a business. A lot of you need to plow that out. You can save a ton of money plowing it yourself. And I kind of think it's fun. I enjoy doing it. But the reason I'm talking about all this is Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer is your Boss snowplow dealer. And Boss snowplows, I think, has just now taken it to a whole another level. They are the snowplow that you want to have. They can do so many different things. And the great thing about Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer is they have a full service department. They can install it. They can take you through it, show you how to operate your Boss snowplow. They can help you get financing. They have the parts. They have everything. This isn't something where, you get a snowplow and then you have problems with it or whatever, and the people that sold it to you, that's all they do is sell it. They don't know anything. Not with Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer. They not only do they carry the best snowplowers you can get, Boss snowplows, but they do everything from helping you pick the right one all the way through to the service after sale and all that. So get a hold of my friends at Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer. Now, you can go see them in person in Missoula, Montana, 5680 Expressway in Missoula. Also, you can, of course, give them a call. They'd love to talk to you there. Their phone number, 406-549-4243. Or one of my favorite ways to take a look at everything they have is just go online, rmtte.com, rmtte.com, Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer. Be ready for winter this year with a Boss snowplow and check out all their inventory and everything else. You're going to like dealing with these folks. Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer. And we're back here on the Montana Outdoor Podcast. Scott Thompson, my guest here. And Scott, thanks so much for spending so much time with me today and on talking about antelope in Montana. When hunters are out there, trying to get one of these, and some people say, "Oh, it's not that hard." Well, I guess it depends on where you hunt and what kind of access that you get to, to and all that. But any tips, ideas, tricks of the trade that you can share with our folks that you think would help them have a little more success?
There's a couple things that I think influence antelope distribution. They're thinking about forage, and in fall we do start to see some green up oftentimes, or there may be in some agriculture that provides some green up. So that certainly having some of that in the vicinity never hurts. But as soon as the first shots are fired, antelope do start thinking about security, and no different than you might think about elk hunting is start to think about areas that maybe are not as roaded or as high a road density. We talked a little bit about those flat areas that presumably don't have any cover or anywhere to hide out there, and that's perfect for an antelope, especially if there's not a road where they can get out there and see you coming. As you mentioned, it just depends on how pressured antelope are in that particular area. So in these days with all the electronics and maps and applications and whatnot, doing a little scouting, and you can certainly scout for road densities ahead of time and get a good idea where maybe some areas that you need to go look when the antelope seem to have just vanished.
Yeah.
And with the forage areas, certainly it doesn't hurt to be thinking about maybe some private land that you might want to go knock on some doors and ask, well ahead of time. Always helps. And you'll find that a lot of landowners in Montana are really generous with their land and allowing some hunting if it's approached the right way. So certainly that, and as well as some block management. So
yeah, and the FWP on your website has some really good ideas there. As far as talking about ethics, about how to approach landowners and do it the right way, and being respectful and all that. There's some really good tips there, and then also just I think the FWP has some great hunt planning tools there, and so I encourage folks to use those tools out there. Looking ahead in the future, when you see these declines in antelope numbers around the state, is there anything that the FWP is trying to do to bring these antelope numbers up? Is there anything on a management side of things? One thing I always think about with antelope is, we know about the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation for elk and various mule deer and whitetail organizations and Pheasants Forever and all that. But I don't know of a antelope organization. Is there one? I mean, excuse me if I'm not seeing that, but I've never noticed one. So what is out there helping you guys to, see that we have antelope in the long-term future?
Yeah, you're right. I'm drawing a blank on an
Yeah.
antelope specific organization. Um, and I think a bit of it is, we've had good numbers for so many years, and it's only in recent years that we've seen a dip in populations, at least in Montana, that raises some concerns. And
Mhm.
in reaction to that, the department did start a statewide research project to better understand both antelope, migrations and seasonal ranges, such as where particular herds fawning and wintering and migrating and things of that nature, as well as looking at mortality and different what we would think of as vital rates like fawning, survival, things of that nature. So we're investing in research to better understand. I think we've got 7 or 8 different populations scattered around the state that seemingly all have been impacted by different variables. Here in the north, we had a tremendous winter in 2010 that we just seem to still refer to and are trying to bounce back from for antelope. But in other areas, there was blue tongue virus, which is seemingly had a prolonged effect on antelope. And so, we're trying to tease apart. And usually, what happens is you find out it's a number of things going on.
Mhm.
But certainly, in our corner of the world, we're looking at a lot of fence barriers, trying to ensure antelope can get to where they need to go. Because they are a bit more migratory up
Yeah.
here. So.
Um, has CWD ever been found in antelope? Does that affect them at all? I mean, I know that it's a
No,
big concern, but it's never been something that's affected them. Why is it that?
no, no. CWD is CWD is specific to the deer family. So deer, elk, moose are all susceptible to CWD,
Mhm.
and so it's of a family of brain neurological diseases, and there's a corollary in sheep, domestic sheep. It's scrapie.
Mhm.
In humans, it's Creutzfeldt-Jakob's disease. But to my knowledge, there is not a variant of these prion diseases that affects pronghorn antelope. So we can
So
be thankful of that.
the blue tongue, how does that affect the antelope? Is it a virus, a bacteria? What is it?
Yeah, it's a virus. So there's a family of blue tongue viruses. Another one is EHD, epizootic hemorrhagic disease, that we often hear about in whitetail deer. But oftentimes those viruses are uh, uh, a virus that's transmitted by typically a biting fly of some sort, a
Oh,
midge
okay.
or a no-see-um or whatnot, and it's transmitted from some host species or antelope that survived a previous blue tongue virus, and then it seems to be partially driven by insect abundance. Like you have these just ripe conditions where you have a lot of insects that transmit the disease, and then also it can be driven by densities of antelope or
Hmm.
white-tailed deer in the case of EHD. So when you have a lot of animals confined in a smaller, you know, part of their habitat with a high insect load and a few individuals that carry it, we see these outbreaks. And so in those diseases, it typically attacks internal organs. Well, it, it causes internal hemorrhaging in the case of EHD, and I believe blue tongue is similar. And eventually, the animal essentially dies of internal hemorrhaging
Hmm.
in fairly short order. In EHD, I'm more more versed in EHD with whitetail, but it can be a matter of weeks until they die. And so, it can happen pretty quickly in those family of diseases. So, yeah.
And as far as Montana's antelope herd, are they pretty healthy from any of these kind of diseases that we know of so far? So is it been primarily just weather that's been the big culprit? Weather and food sources. Well, I guess that's weather too, drought. But is that primarily what's caused these numbers to go down, like we were talking about before, or is there kind of a lasting effect from the last outbreak of the blue tongue?
Yeah, I would say in most of the state, it's the impacts of weather on habitat conditions, except for in Region 5, so it's kind of that Billings North country. There was at least 1 or 2 years of blue tongue back to back, and it's really uncertain if there was some longer lasting impacts from that virus outbreak. So that is one of the study herds in our statewide research as well. But for the rest of the areas, blue tongue has not been a big factor, but rather, we're looking at all these. Is it a habitat issue? Is it a difference in predation rates and that are affecting, survival of fawns and whatnot? Because the fact of it is, when we have things like drought, it may directly impact antelope and their forage and habitat, but it also affects all the prey species on the prairie. And so you can look at the prairie as a smorgasbord of options for predators.
Yeah.
And when times are good, there's lots of ground squirrels and mice and rabbits and grouse and antelope and deer. But when times are tough and the conditions are poor and maybe rabbit populations are down, post 2010, we saw ground squirrel numbers plummet out here, and so there goes one prey species. We had it seemed to us that rabbit populations declined pretty severely. And so there was a number of things where there just was not as much prey on the landscape, and coyotes are great at switching to whatever food is available. So that during some of those times when we have weather challenges, it affects our prey abundance. And but when it's wet and times are good, there's enough for everybody. So.
Well, that's a good point. Lastly, if hunters, as they go out there and they're harvesting antelope and that, are there things that you would like them to report to you guys, or things you would like to know? That, in other words, can we hunters out there be another source of eyes and ears for you?
Certainly we're always interested in different, whether it's a disease or something influencing the health of animals. And, hunters oftentimes do bring us animals that have what appear to be some kind of illness or sickness. And a lot of times those are bucks they've just gotten done with the rut and they've been fighting, and antelope bucks are really prone to injury. So that can be tough to tease that away from something that's maybe more of a health concern. But I think anytime a hunter field dresses an animal and they're, just organs are not right, things are just obviously, not functioning properly, that's something to take note of and potentially make us aware of. And that's different than, say, an injury to a leg or something of that nature. So,
yeah, that's going to happen out there. It's just what goes on. Yeah.
Yeah. Beyond that, it's always interesting to hear about, maybe some places where, maybe it's fencing that really seems to have some antelope penned in, literally. And, maybe there's something that we can do with that landowner or land management agency to help those areas. Some of our collared antelope we've seen where they get inside a fence, maybe with the sheep wire, and they just go round and round that pasture for months. And certainly we want to make sure that antelope can move across the landscape. So,
that I imagine that can help too. So, what's the best way if somebody has a question for you or wants to report something? What's the best way they should get in touch with the FWP? Just local office? Do you mind getting emails? What is your preferred way of people contacting?
Yeah, each of the regional offices has their phone numbers online, and really those folks that when you call our offices are great about getting that information to the right person, because it might not necessarily be me. It might be one of the biologists, in Malta, for example. So either calling or emailing those regional offices can be a great way to get the information to us.
Sure. And for those of you listening to this podcast, I'll put some links in the podcast description. So when you found our podcast, you saw a podcast description there. I usually put all the links right down towards the bottom, and that's where you guys can find it. And I'll put a link to this big game forecast, and I'll put that up for those of you, and you can read what we were talking about a bit with these different areas and how it's affecting the pronghorn. And of course, you're going to find information in that I'll post it, so you'll be able to find information not just on pronghorn, but of course whitetail and elk and all the other games. So that can be a useful tool for you as well. And then there's a few articles and things I've read, and I'll put those links to those in the podcast description too. And that way, you folks, if you have some extra questions or research you want to do, by all means, just click and discover. And you can always email me too in that. Well, Scott, thank you so much for spending time with me today. I appreciate all the work that you and everybody else does at the FWP and helping us keep our animals out there moving along and keeping us able to go out and harvest game. So thanks again for spending time with me today.
You bet, Dale. Thanks for having me on. And
you bet.
Good luck to all those antelope hunters out there.
Yeah. And folks, if you have any, as I said, if you have any other questions, you can get a hold of me. Until then, good luck out there chasing the wily pronghorn or whatever you might be hunting out here in Montana's great outdoors. Until then, be safe and have fun.
Thanks for listening to the Montana Outdoor Podcast. It has been brought to you in part by Superior Hardwoods of Montana, home of the largest selection of in-stock high-end wood products and flooring in the western United States. Let them guide you through the woods at superior-hardwoods.com. And by Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer in Missoula, home of Boss Snowplows, CM Truck Beds, and Diamond Sea Trailers. Just go to rmtte.com for more information. So what did you think of today's podcast? Send your questions and comments to Downrigger at montanooutdoor.com. We should be dropping a new podcast this next Saturday. Until then, we will see you soon out in Montana's great outdoors.